I'm now. Okay, but I am now off Zoom. So you will need to I need to get back on Zoom again.
Nope. We can hear you.
You can hear me, but I can't see anything.
Okay, start your video again.
Yeah, I'll just do it again. Hang on, just give me a moment.
Oh God, listen to that.
Everybody mute themselves.
I can see you, Robin, but you don't have any clothes on.
Oh, what's that say?
Oh, there's Phil.
Sorry.
Why is it recording? Got it. Oh,
Yes.
It shouldn't be so big. It's not
oh, people all of a sudden start doing it. I was thinking, gee, that wasn't very many people. Yeah.
What the fuck is going on?
Somebody's eating chips.
Yeah. Who's eating chips? No, chips.
Go for it, Robin.
Well, just give me a second, Richard, would you please?
Yeah.
At 6:01. I know that you're a taskmaster, but just hang on for a moment, please.
You're right.
Okay. Well, I'll just go ahead without the visuals. Ah, perfect. Okay, so are we all ready? We've got 35 people. So
Okay.
I previously thought that alias were for bank robbers or people like Hulk Hogan or Prince, until I met Lefteris Dariotis. When Richard and I were planning a tour of Greece in 2017, we were introduced via email through Horticultural from the Denver Botanic Garden. I saw the alias Lefteris was using on various internet platforms, such as Instagram and Facebook, and was surprised and kind of confused. He kindly said to choose a name for him from a list. So I chose Lefteris, but many of his now thousands of fans call him Liberto Dario. He was the Horti's indefatigable guide to Greece in 2018, and so knowledgeable and so pleasant to work with that we invited him to guide us Horties again in Chile in 2019. Now he's gaining fame with his 2 beautiful gardens in far-flung suburb of Athens. Is being written up in magazines and newspapers for his gardening skills, and is also being courted by universities for projects using his knowledge of the Greek flora. At the same time, he's working to establish a potentially amazing garden in Crete with a well-known landscape architect. And this is a place you'll all want to visit in the future. We're very fortunate tonight to listen to him talk about some of the glorious flora of Greece that he's encountered on a few of his many travels around his country. Lefteris, te cedo la batuta.
Well, thank you very much, Robin. I'm very happy that I have met all of you guys. I mean, that tour that we had back 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when was it? That was life-changing for me, to tell you the truth. And here we are again. Well, I'm here to talk about Greek plants. Everybody can hear me, I suppose?
We get a lot of background noise.
Anybody's...
I'm trying, it's like, if everyone could mute themselves, that would be so helpful.
How do you do that? How does one mute oneself?
Go down to the little microphone on the far left lower corner.
Or up top also.
Or anyway, there's a microphone icon, click on it. So far, that's much better.
All right.
Okay.
I think we're good.
Lefteris, are you doing better?
Okay. I have perfect silence now.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Thank you, everyone.
Mm-hmm. All right. So let's go forward.
Yes.
most of you actually know me, so that part was not very successful in sewing. But anyways, I'll introduce myself too. Who am I? My name says everything about me, and my name in Greek means freedom or liberty. And this is why I changed my name to Liberto Dario from Dariotis, back many years ago when I created a Facebook account. And I didn't want anybody to know that I'm on Facebook because I was just playing games. So, I thought of this name that I would remember, but it would still be, easy to remember. So there I was, Liberto Dario on Facebook. Back then, I didn't know that Facebook had plants and groups of people that were interested in plants in it. But I slowly realized that there was, and I started joining groups and everything. And then before I knew it, a lot of people actually knew me as Liberto Dario because I was posting the whole time as well. So it stayed there. And I actually can, hear all names that I have right now: Eleftherios, Lefteris, Liberto. It's all the same in my ears. My life is all about plants because I think I was born just to be involved with plants. My interest was really, really early. I think I was like 5 or 6 years old when I was, other children were playing games outside and I was in the garden digging and sewing and everything, and that followed me my whole life. I did plant studies with plant. I did study plants. I did some degrees in Greece, and then I came to California, where most of you are, for almost 4 years. I went to UC Davis for a master's degree in plant biology, and then I went to the UK to do another master's in horticulture. And after that, I lost myself. For when I came back to Greece, I had to go to the army, and then after that, I started. Somebody convinced me that I would be, a good person to get into the public sector, and so I did. And then that took me 3 years to realize that it's not about me. So that's why I'm writing that I'm a reborn plantsman. So I dropped that all the way to the past, and then here I'm just involved with plants and horticulture again. And so what do? I have a small seed and bulb business that takes up most of my time because in order to collect all the seeds from the big collection of plants of almost 3,000 species that I have, takes a lot of time to clean them, to prepare the orders, and then propagate the bulbs from seed and put them all in their boxes and ship them all throughout the world. So, that's a big chunk of my life. But I also do botanic tours. Here's a picture from a small group of that I did in Crete, back with Eric Su from Chanticleer Gardens and some other folks from the UK. And then here's, of course, there's Richard. That picture, Richard, actually became viral. I think I had several thousands of reposts on that picture after we posted that when we were in Chile. What I do recently, because the plant tours thing is actually, frozen, so I cannot go anywhere because of the situation with COVID. I'm involved in some research projects with scientific institutions. For example, the University of Floriculture here in Greece, some institutions that preserve plants and some botanical gardens. So here's me collecting that very small Veronica itea, which is one of the rarest species we have in Greece. It's a vernal pool species up in one particular mountain in central Greece. And all of this that I do has taken a turn towards a particular purpose in my life for the last a year and a half or so. I have decided that my gardens here in Athens are not enough for me anymore, and I have to do something bigger. So I have from now this lifetime project that I'm going to create in Crete, and I eventually gonna move myself to Crete because I was inspired by that picture that you see above here, that view of the mountains behind Heraklion, the biggest city in Crete. And from the other side, there's the the view of the sea. And here's the small map of how the area is gonna look. We have there is discussions about a theater, open theater for music events that we're going to create. We have stables, and we already have 4 horses, so there's going to be free horse riding, and of course a restaurant and a cafeteria for the garden and for live music events, and of course the garden.
Wow.
Yeah, you're going to see this happening, during the following years. It's going to take some time. It's not something easy. It's something very big, but I'm dedicated that I'm going to do it. So you'll see it. Hopefully you come to see it from in Greece as well. So what do I have in my hands? I have access to a lot of plant material from all the travels that I'm doing, seeds and bulbs and everything that I collect. And I have 2 gardens right now near Athens, near the airport in Athens. One of them, the LD, Liberto Dario garden, is an irrigated garden. And the other one is a summer dry garden. Actually, I thank Saxon for that term, summer dry. Since I heard it from him, I had, just made it myself, because it just describes exactly what we're doing here in Mediterranean climates. The LD garden, which is irrigated, hosts a big variety of salvias, which is my biggest passion in plants. I have about more than 200 species and varieties of salvia. And it also allows to grow some of the species that we have in northern Greece or up in higher mountains that need more summer water and regular summer water instead of most of the other Mediterranean areas. So, for example, Lysimachia dubia, a species that resembles the purple loosestrife, which is found in the center of the country. In that garden, actually, some of you have even seen that garden. There's a couple of gravel areas in which I grow a little bit more of the high alpine things, not truly alpine, but at least that need better drainage. For example, these asperulas that are endemic to certain parts of our country. And also the 2 erodiums, 2 yellow erodiums that are native to Greece, Erodium chrysanthemum and Erodium hartwigianum. Actually, the second one, hartwigianum, is a really rare species that it's only found in Mount Askion in northern Greece, Macedonia. The garden keeps on changing all of the time because I keep collecting. I want to grow everything I see in front of me. And, I constantly reproduce things from seed. I constantly put cuttings. So I always need to try. And that's why my garden is never the same every year. This is typical, change and, put in so many new things every year. On the other side, the goat garden, it's more of a little bit more stable thing because there the plants need to establish themselves for some more years before they prove what they can do. There's about 400 different species of Mediterranean native species, not Mediterranean native, Mediterranean climate native species. Most of them are from the Mediterranean, but there's things from California and some of things from Australia, South Africa, etc. Most of that garden is, just borders, flat borders that have that grow shrubs and everything else. But the only part that it's a little bit different is the driveway, because that house belongs to my relatives that live in the States. There is a driveway that they use in the summer when they come for vacation. So that driveway has been transformed to a small meadow that I grow annuals and bulbs. And then by the end of spring and early summer, it has to be cleaned and then get ready to, to park cars. But let's see some general things about the whole of Greek flora that you may not know. Greece has a very, very rich flora. Actually, you can compare it with California if you like. I think California has about 8,500 species. I'm not sure. We have 600 taxa here. And actually, we have the highest plant diversity in Europe. Only Spain has some more species than us, but then Spain is about 5 times as big as Greece. So, that makes for a less high diversity than here. Another peculiar thing is that 15%, almost 6% of our plants are endemic to the country, and I'll explain later why. And that counts for 900 species. And then you can see the numbers there, if you're interested in numbers. So why do we have so much diversity? First of all, let's look at the map here. You see where Greece is positioned. It's in, at the edge of the Mediterranean Sea. And it connects itself to the north with the Balkans, to the east with Turkey, and to the south with Africa. But there's the Mediterranean in between. So the geographical position is the most important factor because we get, elements of flora from the Balkans. And actually, because our climate is so varied in the north compared to the south, we have species that grow in the very north of the country that they have the extension of their growing up to Sweden and Norway, for example. We have the Swedish fir that grows all the way up to northern Greece. Whereas in the south, well, to the east, we have Turkey, as I said, and then especially on the islands of the Eastern Aegean, we get elements of Turkish flora that we don't see in the rest of the country. And also to the south of the Peloponnese here, or to Crete, we get elements of the flora of Africa. So there's common species in Egypt and Crete. The geological diversity is also an important factor because we have different types of soils. We have mainly limestone, but also serpentine, and there are acid soils in the north, and all kinds of different rocks. And the climate, as I said, is quite varied, although it is Mediterranean in most of the country. To the north, it can be, raining all throughout the summer. Also, the temperature is quite varied. So whereas in Crete in the summer, you can get up to 40, 45 degrees easily in the summer, there's places in the north where you go rarely above 30 in the summer. And last but not least is the paleobiogeographic history. And what is that? Let's see. I'll take you first to this gorge that we have in Thrace. It is actually one of the most beautiful gorges we have because there is a train line going all around, and there is the old path that was used to maintain the train line that you can walk for several kilometers. So it's one of the most beautiful walks you can do in the north of Greece. And there's several things growing on the sides as you walk along, for example, Iris reichenbachii. But there's also a very peculiar thing growing, this Haberlea rhodopennata. It's a small plant that needs very moist situations to grow, and has to be has to be in a shady situation too. And it is a gesneriate, which is unusual. And it's not the only gesneriate that we have. If we go to this gorge in Macedonia, north of Greece, actually you can see here a small thing up on the rock. That's a campanula, a big flowered monocarpic campanula, one of the many campanulas we have here. But as we said, we have another gesneriate here, Ramonta nathaliae. And if you go to a different gorge, the biggest gorge in the Balkans, the Vikos gorge, which is connected to the Aos gorge, that's two different rivers, you'll see another gesneriate species, Ramonta serbica. And if you go to Mount Olympus, the tallest mountain that we have, almost 3,000 meters, that's about 9,000 feet, you'll see a native gesneriate there as well, Zanchia hildreichii. So 4 different gesneriates, and from the 5 different gesneriates that grow in the whole of Europe, grow in Greece. And why is that? There's another peculiar thing. We have palm trees as well, as they have in Africa, as you have in California as well. So in selected pockets in the south of the country, we have a native Phoenix theophrasti, that grows on Crete, on Rhodes, and all of the southern island. So this explains those plants explain that they were stayed behind in the last ice age. So when most of Europe was covered in ice in the last ice age, the very south of the north of the Mediterranean or the south of Europe was not covered. And these are relict plant species that stayed behind and are still there. So that's another reason of why so much diversity here. But the biggest reason of all is that the country is very, very varied. We have mountains and we have islands. And actually, most of the country is mountains and islands. There's no valleys almost. As you see in the numbers, most of the areas are, above 650 feet. And there's, 1/3 of the country is above 2,000 feet. Actually, we have a saying in Greece. We are saying that when God was making Europe, he started with the north. He made France, lots of valleys and a few mountains here and there and rivers and everything. And then he went to the next country. He put a little bit of this, little bit of that. And then at the end, he ended up with a pile of rocks that he didn't know what to do. And he threw it away in the edge of the Mediterranean and it created Greece. And from our mountains, there's mountains that are really, really high. And in our geographical situation, location, the limit that sets the alpine environment, so true alpine environment that true alpine plants grow, it's 800 and 200 feet. And we have 5 mountains that are above that, and they are located at the main part of the country. And mountains are isolated and they need evolution, so we get more diversity. The same with islands. 6,000 islands in the Ionian and Aegean side. The Ionian is this side and Aegean is this side. And although 277 of them are inhabited, there's endemic species to, lots of them, even the smaller, just rocks that stand in the middle of the sea. Crete itself, the biggest island of Greece, has 170 endemic species, which is a lot. So, we have so many plants. So what do we do with them? At least what do I do with them? Especially since we are in a country that doesn't have, an education for Mediterranean gardening, for drought-tolerant gardening. Really early on, not really early on, but about 6-7 years ago, I decided that, I should do something with all of these plants. Try to test them and see if they're good for Greece. As you see the horticultural trade throughout the world, you will see that there is a few species that come from Greece, that there's a big variety that doesn't exist in horticulture. And this is the plants that I'm looking for. So I'm looking for ease of cultivation. I'm the kind of gardener that doesn't want to do extra things, all of the time. So I never put any fertilizers, I never put any chemicals because I just don't have time. So something has to grow just by getting water or not getting water. I'm very interested in drought and summer heat tolerance because here in Athens, 40 degrees Celsius or 100 degrees Fahrenheit is quite often. Actually, we have had 100 degrees for the last 5 days, and the prediction is that it's going to continue for another 4 or 5 days. They also have to be summer water tolerant, despite of being summer dry plants. And this is the difference maybe with California. California doesn't usually get summer rainstorms throughout the summer, but here we do. There can be a week all of a sudden in the end of July or in the middle of August that we get 3 or 4 major rain events in a week. And that makes for many Mediterranean plants to wake up. And this is when it gets really dangerous for them. If they're the species that they're going to die after that, and many species do, then I'm not interested in them. They have to be, exactly, perfectly adapted to what we have here. Of course, I'm looking for flowering and then abundance of flowers and good colors and everything. I'm very interested in summer looks, so good foliage and then looking good all throughout the year. and of course, variations that I can see in nature, and then I can propagate and use for the garden. So I have created 7 different cases for you of plants that you know and of plants that you may not know. The first group that I'm having is the Lomelosias. Lomelosia is a group within Scabiosa that was actually divided from it, and it created a new genus. And they're shrubby things. The most commonly used plant of the Lomelosias here in the Mediterranean is Lomelosia cretica. And despite that it's been called cretica, it's native to Italy, which is crazy. Linnaeus was doing crazy things all of the time. But it's the most commonly plant that you will find. And that annoys me because we have so many other good Lomelosias here in Greece and nobody's using them. So I'll start by taking you to the Melangavi Peninsula, which is a location at the very east of Attica, near Corinth. And this actually is a place where the temple of Ira is located. And nearby grows another Lomelosia species, Lomelosia imetia. It takes the name from the Mount Imitos that we have near Athens. And this is actually a much daintier plant than cretica. So I have propagated this, and it looks perfectly fine for the garden, apart from the rich flowering that it has all throughout, from almost February up to the end of June. It creates these beautiful seed heads that follow the whole summer. So great foliage all throughout the year, and then good seed heads and flowers. It's actually a very good plant, better than cretica. And to propagate it, it's very easy. Actually, this is what I'm doing for propagation mainly. I have found these very useful plugs. They are like turf and have some kind of glue that connects it all together. They're moist. And then you just stick your cutting in the rooting powder, and then there's a hole in the middle of it, and you stick your cutting there. And within a few weeks, I just water them every 3-4 times in a day in my small greenhouse here, and I have very good results. Sometimes I even take them together on the collecting trips. So I have a tray, and I directly collect cuttings. I put them in the rooting powder, put them in the tray, and then keep it all in a plastic box in the car for as long as the trip takes. There's more Serabium Lomelosia species. Minoana is also a species from Crete, native endemic to Crete. Smaller flowers and smaller seed heads, but still very nice foliage. That goes around in the trade a little bit in the Mediterranean, and it's also around the variety that goes around is a rounded bush. But when I was in Crete a few years ago, I found this selection of variety that created this big mats of foliage, several square meters. So it seemed like a very good plant for growing as a ground cover. So I have taken cuttings and I'm trying to test it to see how it does.
No.
And then I will take you to the island of Karpathos, which is one of the islands in the southeastern Aegean, one of the Dodecanese. Dodecanese means the 12 islands, as in Dodekatheon, the genus, the 12 gods. A very beautiful island. So I was there for vacation once, and I always go to the mountains and all the areas that I can find wild plants while I'm on vacation. So while I was there on Karpathos, I went to the very top peak of their mountain there, about 1,000 meters, 3,000 feet. And when I reached there, I see these big blobs of foliage, dry foliage up in the rocks. And I immediately knew that it was a Lomelosia. That was in the early days when my knowledge of the Greek flora was not really
Marlene's watching.
So
Marlene's watching.
So I had to, because it should be different from what we have in Athens, in central Greece. So I had to take some material from it. So I had to, make myself go up somehow. Sometimes I get in dangerous situations trying to get seeds or cuttings, but at the end it's all worth it. So here it is. I've never seen it in flower in nature, because since then I have found it in 2 more different islands, but always in the summer. So I never seen it in flower, but in the garden it looks great. And it's actually the biggest floweret of all the Lomelosias if you compare it to the others, and the darkest green, the greenest foliage from all of the species. But not all the Lomelosias are big and shrubby. Some of them are really different. Here in Lefkada, one of the islands of the Ionian side, we have a species that makes a ground cover, and this has proved to be one of the best plants for the Mediterranean gardening, in my opinion. It needs no summer water at all. Back in Lefkada, it grows all the way from sea level in sand up to 1,000 meters. So it can take cold as well as heat. No drop of summer and no drop of water all throughout the summer. And then it flowers throughout the summer. This, in contrast to the other Lomelosias that flower earlier in spring. So there you have it, a perfect plant for Mediterranean gardening. There's 2 different subspecies of that. One of them grows in the Peloponnese, and the other one is central Greece. But the first one is a little bit of an alpine thing, so it cannot take summer heat. And the second one needs more summer water. So I have tested them all, and I've decided that the previous one, the one from Lefkada, is the best subspecies to grow. Last week, not last week, 2 weeks ago, I was in Epirus for a collecting trip for some tulips. And then as I was driving down this road, I saw up in the rocks another thing. It didn't look like a Lomelosia because the foliage is very lush and green. But when I decided to go up and see what it is, I saw the small buds here, and it was a Lomelosia that didn't even have an idea it existed. And after I looked it up, these are pictures from the web. It seems like another good species because that area of Greece is also very hot in the summer. So I'm growing it and see where it will take me. The second case that I have is the Centaureas. Centaurea is, many of you can hear Centaurea and then feel weird because there's so many species of Centaurea from the Mediterranean that have proved to be very bad weeds for the Western US. But here in Greece, Centaurea is the largest genus we have, over 130 species. And most of them, over 70, are endemic to the country. And not only that, they can be endemic to just a mountain, just a canyon, just a very small area. They are very varied. You can find species that grow just on the sun by the beach, and there are species that are true alpines and grow above 2,000 meters. And some of them, despite that, they sound like a weed, they may be very, very difficult to grow. Here's a collection of different species that we have. But I want to discuss some very good particular ones that I have found. We will start with Rhodos. Rhodos is another big island we have in the southeastern Aegean from the Dodecanese Islands. And the first time I was in Rhodos, it was in 2016, as you see here. It was spring, March, and I have gone to see the peonies of Rhodes. But as I was driving, I see this canyon, gorge. Gorges are not the usual thing for Rhodos. Gorges are known from either islands such as Crete, but here was a canyon, so I had to explore what it was. You always know that when there's a gorge, especially on an island, there's certain plants that are going to be different from the rest of the mountain. So as I was walking, there it was, this big, foliage thing that definitely looked like a Centaurea rosette. And actually it proved to be one of the rarest Centaureas we have, Centaurea lactucifolia, with leaves like a lettuce. And I later found out that it's even consumed as a lettuce from the locals, as many other Centaureas do. So that was in 2016. I never saw it in flower. 2 years later, in 2018, I decided to go back to Rhodes to collect to see it in flower maybe. 2 months later, it was March the previous time, or maybe find some seeds. As I was coming nearby, I saw this small castle. That's another thing that I always have to be careful about. When I see a castle, a monastery up in a mountain that has vertical walls and situations that could host crevice plants or chasmophytes, you always have to explore. In the beginning, when I was seeing a monastery, I just avoided that. But now I'm doing what I call the monastic botany. I always visit monasteries just to find the plants, and the same with castles. So in this castle, we have Achillea cretica here, a shrubby species that grows all around the southern Aegean. And the castle itself had very good views of the area. But nearby was growing this small thing that I had no idea what it was. It looked like an alyssum, but then the seed heads were different. I collected seeds, and it proved to be Fibigia lunarioides, which is another rare species of the Dodecanese. And here it is, growing 2 years later in one of the gardens that I'm attending. There's a museum nearby here, of which I'm attending the garden, and it's growing perfectly happy there. It flowers all throughout the winter, so it's a good plant because there's not many Mediterranean plants that flower in the heart of winter. Most of them wait for spring in order to flower. Back to the Centaurea. So I finally reached the gorge that I was in 2016, and I was determined that I will get some material from that plant. Now, as you see, the gorge has this, kind of, I don't remember the word, so these steps that you can use to go up. So that I do. I was alone. So I started going here and there and further up. And then at one point, I realized there's no way to go down. I have lost my track of how to go down. So it was one of the crises that, when you're out in the field that you have, I panicked and I didn't know what to do. Although I had some friends in the town nearby, I decided, okay, I'm going to call them and then let them know that I'm here and, something will happen. And I had no signal, of course. So I was there all alone, wondering what I will do. Anyway, I sat down, I smoked a cigarette because back then I was smoking. And then, after a while, I got myself more, calm. And then I finally found the way back. But it took me 3 hours to get out of the gorge. And also, I had found the plant, but I hadn't seen it in flower. So I didn't fulfill my purpose as well. But anyways, I continued my trip. And then as I was driving, I saw this, another castle and monastery, small church on top. And I thought, okay, vertical walls must be something interesting. So I had to find a way to reach it. There's dense forest around. And I did, and I was successful this time. So I found these, dry Centaurea plants that had gone to seed. And with a little bit of effort, I collected some seeds. And then we come to 3 years later. So 5 years from the first time that I saw the plant. And it grows in the museum that I attend. And then it has these huge flowers. It's probably one of the largest Centaurea species that there is. And also it's a very large plant, as you see, my friend here for comparison. There are similar stories to all of the Centaureas almost, because most of them are rare and grow in difficult spots. Grbava sensis, that easy name, is a species that grows in the north of Greece. It has proved to do perfectly in the gravel garden, in the irrigated garden. And then Tsarelli, it's a funny story how I collected that, because I had gone to collect that for 3 or 4 times in the 3 supposed locations that it's growing, and I was unsuccessful. And another time, after I dropped all my efforts and I realized I'm never going to search for that again, I was going to look for another plant, and then I stopped my car, and then I wanted to use the restroom out in the field there, and then there it was in front of me, and oops, sorry. So I immediately took cuttings, and then a few years later, here it is. Actually, it's one of the rarest species we have in the country. Heldrahi, it's another species that only grows on Mount Varasova, a mountain above the Corinth Bay in the middle of the country. It's a very strict chasmophyte where it grows. And despite that, usually chasmophytes in nature are not very endangered because they just prefer that environment. And their worst fear, of course, in Greece is goats. Goats can access anything that it's not vertical, and this is why most chasmophytes are safe up in their walls. But in this case, this is not safe because this particular mountain is very popular with rock climbers. So this is the main threat that it has right now. And actually something has been done before the whole population is destroyed by rock climbing. But anyways, I had taken material, and it grows really nice and much bigger here in the museum. We leave the central Greece to go to Crete, and one of the most beautiful gorges that there is in Crete is the Topolia Gorge. I think I was there with Hortis when we were back in 3 years ago. There's an Setoria species that grows there that flowers a little bit later than when we were, which I have found to be the perfect biennial plant to have for the garden. I've never seen it in flower in nature, but in the garden, it has a very big flower, burgundy flower, and it flowers for almost 3 months, from late April to July. Easy to grow from seeds, and within 2 years you have flowers. A very good biennial. We stay in the Topolia Gorge, and we changed to salvias. As I said, salvias is my favorite group of plants, and Salvia pomifera is a very well-known plant in Greece because it's one of the teas that we have here, and we drink it. But it usually, as you see here, it has this very subtle and not very strong color. Almost all throughout the central country, it's that same color. But on the Topolia Gorge, I have found some very strongly colored plants, which I have taken cuttings of and I have propagated, and they grow pretty nice in the garden. I have even found white varieties, and that has proved to be a very beautiful, white flowers, lime green calyces plant for the dry garden. The scent of the leaves is amazing. It's almost as good as the California sages, but the plant needs an alkaline soil, so I'm not very sure how it will do for you guys there. But it's well worth to look it up. I have searched for different colors in all of the salvias that we have here. For example, Salvia ringens, it's a plant that is also very popular in the States. I see that a lot of people use it in especially the areas around Utah, Colorado. It's a more mountain species, but it's also very drought tolerant. And it usually comes in this, blue, a little bit of purple color. But I have selected colors from nature in white, in pink, and recently, about 2 weeks ago, I have found a very beautiful dusky purple too form. So I'm planning to do a whole series of them, and I think they're going to be a very successful plant because Salvia ringens itself, it's already a very successful plant. I have selected, as I said, colors in other salvias as well. Salvia virgata, that looks, it's like an Nemorosa type salvia, but the good thing about it is that it produces this rosette of leaves in the winter. It explodes in flower in spring, and then by the end of spring, it disappears. It goes completely underground. So you can cut it back, and then other things will grow around, which is very useful because it takes just a small place, creates big sow, and then you can other plants can take the sow, that can continue the sow. The typical form is that the light purple that you see here, but I have selected the bicolor form or this very dark purple form here, that it grows together with, American pentstemons. Fruticosa is another tea that we use. Fruticosa because it produces fruits. Actually, they're not fruits, they're galls from a species of wasp that are created on the leaves. And we call them in Greece little apples. And as kids, especially as kids, we eat them when we find them in nature. And they have this, salvia typical scent and taste. And that is the usual color that we find in nature, but I have found a darker form and a white form. We go to the next plant, which is the Cretan Nibboni, probably the most famous plant in Crete. Most botanic visitors to Crete that want to go there is to see this plant in flower, and they actually expect that it's going to be difficult to find and you have to go to certain locations, and it's actually everywhere from the east to west, and then whole hillsides are covered with it. So it's the most easy thing of the Cretan endemics to find. It's a shrub in the Fabaceae, also to be found from different elevations, from sea level up to almost 2,000 meters high, and creates a great sow in spring. And recently we have found, together with a team of botanists that we went there, a white form, which also looks very beautiful, almost like a Ptilotus species from Australia, I think. So we have taken cuttings and are trying to grow it. Here I grow the pink form in the garden. It's a very easy species to propagate. You just put the seeds in the fall in the soil, and then it will easily sprout. But also, as many plants in Greece, it needs alkaline soil. I think that's the main difference that we have in our soils, that most of our soils are alkaline, and then most of yours are either neutral or slightly acid. And another species that is related to that is Ebonus ipthorpi, also very rare, endemic to the central part of the country. And this is my next plant to try and grow it. And then we pass to the Dianthus. Here in Greece, we have combined the word for Dianthus, which is Garifalo, as a plant that we either use in funerals or when we go out at the bouzoukia, at the live music place, to throw at the singers. So people in Greece are not really excited when they hear, when they see the flower of Garifala. But we have so many different species that are so good plants for the garden, and especially this group of shrubby species, mainly from the islands, and it's mainly two particular species, Dianthus fruticosus and Dianthus juniperinus. So the one that means shrubby, and the other one that means with leaves like a juniper. So that was another situation when I was in Carpathos and I was trying to get to the plant. In this case, and a method that many people have heard that are using in Greece for the chasmophytes that grow in vertical places is throw rocks at them, as many with all your power, and then at some point some twig will fall or the seed head will fall, and you will be able to collect some seeds. And that was the case with this particular subspecies. And it proved to be a very good plant for the dry garden, as it flowers in the middle of the summer. All of these shrubby species flower in the middle of the summer. There's many different subspecies. Many of them are quite rare. Dianthus fruticosus is from the central tip, and Juniperinus virginorum is also from a particular mountain south of Iraklio. This one is from my garden. But about a month ago, we were looking for the rarest of the pinks that we have with a team in Crete. And it is said that there's about only 100 individuals of that species. And the location for it is at Eastern Crete, the Koudoumi Gorge or Kavousi Gorge, because the plant is called Juniperinus subspecies cavusicus. We had some information that the plant was growing up on one side of the gorge and this location, and we get to it, and yes, we do see the plant, which is right here, but it's impossible to get material off unless you have a 10-meter long stick to get it. So we weren't prepared for that. It might not look very steep, but it is in this area. But another plant that was flowering there is that Hypericum, which is also a very rare species from Eastern Crete. So anyways, we decided we had no chance of going there. So there was another way to go down the gorge and then walk up all the way in case we find another species, another location. And that took 3 hours to go up. Here it is again, me disappointed of never getting to the plant. But at least we got the Hypericum. So as we were down on the walls of the gorge, we found this location, and actually the plant was just growing somewhere around here. Here it is. And then, it took some nerve to go up these steps and get the cuttings of the plant, but we managed. It's weird, but all of these plants have never been grown before. Neither by botanical gardens or for horticulture here. So I think it's really important that we not saving them necessarily, because in these locations particularly they're quite safe that they will stay there. But in order to promote them and see what they can do for either horticulture, medicine, or whatever else we need them for. But not all dianthus are shrubby. A particular species, Hematocalyx, with calyces like blood, as the name says, is a species that it has several different subspecies, very strictly located throughout the country. And most of them are pink, as most pinks. Hematocalyx from Olympus, and then this very tight, matte alpine species from central Greece. And I also grow these species in the garden. But there is a subspecies, Phytosianus, which was recently described, and it's a yellow. Yellow, it's not very common in the genus Dianthus. Apart from Napi, I don't think anybody can recall any other species that is yellow. So I have this crazy idea of crossing these particular subspecies with the other subspecies, since it's not something that it can do in nature, as they are very apart from each other, and then create this whole line of peach or yellow alpine dianthus, which is something that the market will really enjoy, I think. Surprisingly, even the alpine species do well in my gravel areas, so they can take the heat easily, which is unusual. So hopefully this will be passed on to the rest of the hybrids that I plan to produce. We go back to Rhodes for another dianthus. It was on the same trip in 2016 that I was taking a turn there. I saw this blobs of color out of the dry plants, and I collected seeds. And then this has proved to be one of the most successful plants, dianthus, that I have been growing, Dianthus crinitus. And I have selected forms because the seeds produce different colors. So a good white form and a good pink form that are attractive plants and flower for almost 3 months in spring, and take, of course, summer dry conditions with no problem. We continue to the 6th case, and I'm calling them the tough peonies because, people, at least here in the Mediterranean, and probably for you guys there, especially in the hotter areas of the Western US, have problems with peonies, because peonies usually like colder weather, especially in the winter, in order to produce flower buds. I actually have one Peonia officinalis in the garden for the last 25 years. And out of those 25 years, I think it has flowered 5 or 6 times because it doesn't have enough cold in the winter. So there's several species of peonies that are very good Mediterranean plants because they come from lower elevations. And one particular species is Muscula. And it has several different subspecies. This is the more typical one. Ursoi is much rarer, but also a very good plant. I also grow that in the garden with no problems. It flowers every year. And Hellenica, it's a white species that sometimes you can get pink variation. So these are all good peonies for the garden. Clusia is a species only endemic to Crete. It has a very nice perfume. And it's a funny story how I first found this peony, because Crete has the problem, as I said, of having goats, everything, and goats can get to anything. And they even eat peonies. Peonies are supposed to be poisonous, but they manage to eat them for somehow or destroy them. So I was in Crete with this group of people, and we were looking, we had, this motto of find as many endemics as you can. We were there for 10 days. I think we managed to find about 70 of the 170 endemics. And we were desperate to find the peony. So we were asking anywhere we could. The first location that we asked was a gas station up in the central White Mountains. And we had the book of the Cretan flora, and we're showing the picture saying, have you seen this flower around? Or especially to shepherds and people that might be connected with nature somehow. So at this gas station, the guy said, yeah, we have it in the back garden. So he runs up to the garden and gives us a flower. So the first peony of that we saw was in a garden. But later on, we were in another plateau up in Eastern Crete, and we found a very nice old lady that had a small cafeteria. And she said, yeah, I'll take you to the peonies. And she took us about half an hour away, and we jumped fences, and we got really sweaty, and it was really difficult to get, and she was with us. But we managed to find the peonies, as you see there. Later on, because he had this small cafe place, we decided to stay and have a yogurt. That was her specialty, yogurt with honey. And she took this box of fossils that she has found up in the nearby plot. And she actually gave me this fossil as a gift. So I have this to remember. But the most funny thing about the whole story is that I was holding the book in order to show her the picture of the peony and the flowers of Crete, as you see behind. That was a map of Crete that she gave to me, a very old map. But anyway, she took the Flowers of Crete book, which was in English, but she was, lifting out the book. And for every picture that she was seeing, she knew the name of the plant in Cretan and the use of the plant that they had in Crete. So that was, a big chunk of information that should be written down. And so I'm planning soon to go and take a whole interview of her and then have this all in a book, or at least for my use or for a future purpose. These older people up from the mountains are getting really rarer and rarer. The young people are not really interested in plants, or at least they don't know their uses. So we have to somehow keep this knowledge. And the next peony is from Rhodos again. This one was very easy to find because as you're driving around the forests of Rhodes, you get this very strong smell of cinnamon, and that's how you know that there are peonies nearby. Peregrina is a red species that we have, especially in the north of the country, but also in the island of Lefkada. And the most weird of them all and the most rarest of them all is Peonia parnassica, a dark chocolate peony that we have in Mount Parnassus, the famous Mount Parnassus with Delphi. The last group of plants that I'm going to talk about is tulips that work. The same with peonies. I'm very annoyed because all the tulips that I buy in the commerce from Holland, that's grown, they don't easily flower here because we don't have very strong winters. And the tulips, in order to look good, they need at least to have some cold in the winter and then a cool spring in order to perform well. But there are Greek species that come from very hot locations and they don't need the cold of the winter. And their species, they're divided in different groups. So one group is that of true species. What I'm saying, true species. True species is that plants that actually produce seeds and reproduce themselves, and they're not connected to people in order to propagate themselves. I explain why. Tulipa critica is such a case. Tulipa bithynica from the island of Lesbos is such a case. You see them in natural environments here. And Tulipa goulimii, my favorite one, from the island of Kythera and also from the Peloponnese, is such a case. So it reproduces itself by seeds, and it's found in natural situations. Now we go to different species and different group of species. These are species that can reproduce from seed, but are strongly dependent to human in order to survive. How is that so? They are species that have lost their ability to cope with other plants, they don't have much strength in order to cope with other plants. So they need the situation of a human cultivated field in order to do well. Tulipa cypria from Cyprus is such a case. Undulatifolia from most throughout the country is such a case. In this area, Tulipa undulatifolia grows with other bulb species that also do the same thing. Orphanidia is such a case. It comes in different hues of red and oranges. And also it is connected with another bulbous rhizomatous species from Berberi daisy, Leontici leontopetalum, also in the red data book of plants of Greece. So as you see in most of these cases, not this, these plants are grown in situations where there's usually a wheat field. And this is what it needs. It needs, a person to take all the enemies away that it will have in the natural situation, so that it can grow and reproduce itself as it needs. Now the old cultivation techniques of the wheat fields were exactly suited for them, because the tilting was not extremely deep, so the bulbs would get to survive below the tilting zone, and there were no herbicides used. Actually, the worst enemy of tulips in Greece is potatoes, because as soon as you take a wheat field and you plant potatoes, you immediately use fertilizers that are selective for monocotyledonous plants. So within a year, you can disappear the whole of population of tulips from a field. Actually, I was talking with a farmer down in the Peloponnese, and he said that from what he remembers, in the last 10 years, about 80 or 90% of the population of tulips in his area has disappeared. And that it was really nice to see that he was really interested in order to retain them. So he was doing as good as he could in order to have tulips in his fields and not using any chemicals. And he also was taking seeds from the tulips and then getting them to the fields of the other farmers so that they can grow to all the farms in the area. And he was 90 years old. So that was really sweet. And we go to the last group of species. No, actually, this bakery from Crete, which creates these big mats of color up in the Omalos plain, is also in the same category with the previous one. So here again, in cultivated fields, and the same is with Saxatilis, which are very closely related. The only difference is that one has black stamens and the other one has yellow stamens. But many people say that it's the same species. Actually, it's all Saxatilis. And here I grow it in my driveway area that I was talking in the goat garden. And Silvestris is doing both things. It can grow also in the wild or grow in wheat fields as well. But then we have species like Hageri that have an Agenensis and Dorfleri from Crete, and Radii from Chios, the most impressive species that have even lost their reproduction ability to reproduce from seeds. So they just reproduce themselves with bulbs. So they are even more heavily dependent on people in order to keep alive. If you don't have any seed bank in the soil, as soon as you use a selective herbicide, the whole population is out and never back again. And especially since potatoes, especially in the islands where most of the tulips are native, are getting to be a very, very popular crop, tulips are disappearing. So this is one of the last projects that I'm involved. In the last 2 months, I have been going all around Greece, collecting tulip bulbs in order to first see how they can do in horticulture, also see their pharmaceutical, what they can offer us as pharmaceuticals, and last, to see if all the species are true species, because it is said that many are the same species and different variations of the same species. So, we're going to do some DNA testing and find out what it's truly about. So tulips bring me to the end of my presentation, and thank you very much for listening to me. And you can find me, as you see there, on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. I'm trying to be as active as I can on these things, and I usually post for all the places that I go and all the plants that I see. So thank you once again for listening to me.
Okay, this is Susan. I'm coming back on. I'm going to halt the recording now, but you guys can chatter among yourselves as long as you want. And the Zoom will keep going until there's silence for a while, and then it'll cut out.
All right.